On the cold, moonless night of October 26, 2023, a single decision set in motion a sequence of events that would unravel the fabric of a family and expose a darkness lurking in the most unassuming of places. It was a decision born of youthful pride and a fierce desire for independence. A decision that, in hindsight, would be replayed 1,000 times in the minds of those who loved Amara Jenkins. For Amara, it was simply a matter of getting home from work. For the shadow waiting by the side of the road, it was the final move in a game only he was playing. The story, however, does not begin at that desolate bus stop. It begins with the aftermath. It begins with the piercing blue and red lights that sliced through the pre-dawn mist on Old Creek Road the following morning. Detective Isabella Rossi stepped out of her unmarked sedan, the crunch of gravel under her sensible shoes. The only sound, besides the hushed murmur of uniforms and the distant caw of a crow. The scene was deceptively tranquil. A simple, three-sided bus shelter stood like a forgotten relic, its plexiglass scarred with graffiti. The air was thick with the damp, earthy smell of the dense woods that pressed in on either side of the road. A wall of black and green. What they had found there was not a body. It was an absence. A lone canvas tote bag sat upright on the bench, as if its owner had just stepped away for a moment. Inside, Rossi found a wallet with an ID for an Amara Jenkins, age 18. There was a half-eaten protein bar and a well-worn paperback copy of a classic novel. On the ground nearby lay a single white sneaker, its laces still tied. A heavy graphic design textbook was splayed open a few feet away. Its pages rippled with morning dew. It looked like a snapshot of a life interrupted, a life that, until 10 hours ago, had been brimming with promise. To understand what happened at this lonely outpost, you have to understand Amara Jenkins. 18 is a fragile, powerful age. It is the precipice between the safety of childhood and the daunting freedom of the world beyond. Amara stood firmly on that edge, leaning forward. She was bright, with a smile that could disarm, and eyes that held a keen intelligence. She had her life mapped out with the meticulous precision of an artist sketching a final design. She was in her first semester at Northgate Community College, studying graphic design. Her dream was to work for a major animation studio, to create worlds and characters that would live on screens and in the imaginations of children. It was a big dream for a girl from a working-class neighborhood, but Amara was a big dreamer. Her determination was her engine. It was what pushed her to take the late shift at the 24-hour diner, the Greasy Spoon, 3 nights a week. The money was essential. It paid for her tuition, her expensive art supplies, and eased the burden on her mother, Denise. Amara didn't want to be a burden. She wanted to be a partner. Denise Jenkins saw her daughter's ambition, and it filled her with a mixture of pride and a deep, gnawing anxiety. That anxiety often surfaced in the form of small everyday arguments. The argument they had on the afternoon of October 26th was one of those. Denise stood by the stove, stirring a pot of chili that filled their small apartment with a warm, spicy aroma. She'd spoken quietly, her back to her daughter. She explained that the late shift worried her. She said that the bus that ran along Old Creek Road after midnight was unreliable and the route was too isolated. She had offered to dip into her meagre savings to pay for a rideshare for Amara on work nights. Amara, sitting at the kitchen table, sketching in her notebook, had bristled at the suggestion. She told her mother, with the gentle exasperation only a teenager can muster, that she was not a child. She insisted that she was perfectly capable of taking the bus. She argued that thousands of people did it every day, and that being overly fearful was not a solution. The money, she stated, was for her future, not for conveniences. What Denise didn't know was that Amara's fierce independence was a shield. She was scared sometimes. The walk from the diner to the first bus stop, the long lonely ride, and the final walk home through quiet streets, it all carried a low hum of risk, But admitting that fear felt like a failure. It felt like admitting that the world was too big and too dangerous, and that her dreams were impractical. She refused to let that be true. So she had smiled, kissed her mother's cheek, and promised to be careful. She had promised to text when she was on the bus and when she got home. A promise that, by the next morning, would become a source of unbearable torment for her mother. The shift at the diner that night was long and grueling. A tour bus had broken down nearby, flooding the small establishment with tired, irritable travellers. Amara moved with an efficiency that belied her age, refilling coffee cups, taking orders, and placating frustrated customers with a calm grace. Her co-worker, a kind older woman named Maria, noticed the exhaustion in Amara's eyes as they cleaned up after the rush. Maria had offered her a ride. She said it was no trouble, that she was heading in the same general direction and could drop her just a few blocks from her apartment. It was a moment, a fork in the road. A simple yes would have changed everything. But Amara's pride, that stubborn and powerful engine, took over. She thanked Maria profusely but declined. She explained that she had her bus pass and a book to read, and that she actually enjoyed the quiet time to decompress after a hectic shift. It was a lie, but a necessary one for her to believe in her own self-sufficiency. This decision would cost her her life. Walking out of the diner just after 11:30 p.m, the night air was colder than she expected. It carried the first real bite of late autumn. Amara pulled her jacket tighter and began the short walk to the bus stop on the main avenue. That first leg of her journey was through a well-lit commercial district, and she felt relatively safe. She boarded the first bus, found a seat by the window, and put in her earbuds, losing herself in a playlist of lo-fi beats. The transfer point was where the city began to fray at the edges. She got off the bright, bustling city bus and waited for the 4B line. The 4B was different. It was an older, rattling machine that serviced the semi-rural outskirts of the city, where streetlights grew sparse and the gaps between houses widened into dark patches of field and forest. Her stop was the second to last on the line, Old Creek Road. When the bus hissed to a halt and the doors opened, she was the only one to get off. The bus pulled away, its red taillights shrinking into the distance, leaving her in a profound and sudden silence. The bus stop was little more than a lean-to against a backdrop of impenetrable woods. A single weak street light overhead cast a sickly yellow glow, flickering erratically. It hummed and buzzed, a dying insect fighting against the overwhelming darkness. The light it provided was meager, creating dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Amara sat on the cold metal bench, pulling her tote bag close. She checked the transit app on her phone. The next and final bus home was due in 17 minutes. 17 minutes felt like an eternity. The silence was unnerving. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the small unseen rustlings of the woods, the creak of branches in the wind. Every sound was magnified, every shadow a potential threat. She tried to focus on her book, but the words wouldn't settle. Her gaze kept darting up from the page, scanning the empty road, peering into the inky blackness of the trees. She felt a primal sense of being watched. It was an old, instinctual fear, the kind her ancestors must have felt sitting by a fire, listening to the sounds of the night, just beyond the light. Why had she been so stubborn? Why hadn't she just accepted the ride? It was then that she saw him. He didn't emerge from the woods or walk down the road. He seemed to simply materialize from the deepest shadows near the edge of the bus shelter, as if he had been there all along, waiting. He was a man who looked to be in his 50s, his frame thin under a collection of layered, ragged clothing. A grimy beanie was pulled low over a thatch of greying hair, and his face was a roadmap of hardship, etched with deep lines. He moved with a slow, shuffling gait, each step deliberate. He didn't look at her, not at first. He just moved to the far end of the long bench and sat down, a good 6 feet of space between them. He carried with him the faint, sour smell of unwashed clothes and stale liquor. Amara tensed, her hand tightening on her phone in her pocket. Her thumb hovered over the power button, ready to dial 911. He was the stereotype she had been warned about, the bogeyman of late-night travel. Her mind raced. She could get up and walk down the road away from him. But where would she go? Into the darkness? Standing here, under the flickering light, seemed marginally safer than walking into the unknown. The man did nothing. He just sat, staring out at the empty road, his hands clasped between his knees. Minutes passed. The silence returned, now charged with a new human tension. Amara tried to regulate her breathing, telling herself he was just another person waiting for the bus, a homeless man seeking shelter from the cold. He was probably more scared of the world than she was. Then he spoke. His voice was not what she expected. It wasn't the slurred, incoherent mumble of a drunk. It was a low, gravelly baritone, but the words were clear, almost educated. He wasn't speaking to her. He was speaking to the night. He said that regret was a funny thing. He explained that it was like a phantom limb, an ache for something that was no longer there, something you yourself had severed. Amara pretended not to hear, her eyes glued to her book, though she was reading the same sentence over and over. He continued his monologue, his voice a steady, rhythmic drone. He spoke of choices and consequences, of moments that branch into 1,000 different futures. He had the air of a fallen philosopher, a man who had once been brilliant and was now relegated to sharing his musings with the darkness. It was a performance, and a good one. It was designed to intrigue, to disarm. Against her better judgment, Amara found herself listening. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't asking for money. He was just talking. The initial spike of fear began to subside, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Who was this man? What was his story? This was the first hook, the first subtle thread of the web being cast. He fell silent again, and the quiet felt different this time, less menacing. After another minute, he turned his head and looked at her directly, for the first time. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue, but they were shockingly clear and alert. They held none of the fog of intoxication she had expected. They were sharp, appraising. He gestured with his chin toward the book in her lap. He asked if it was any good. His tone was casual, friendly. Amara hesitated, then nodded. She mumbled that it was a classic for a class she was taking. He smiled, a slight, sad twist of his lips. He said he had read it a long time ago. In another life, he added. He spoke of the themes of the book with a surprising familiarity, a depth of understanding that caught her completely off guard. He was drawing her in, building a bridge of shared intellect between his world of squalor and her world of aspiration. He then shifted the conversation. He told her he could tell she was a good person. He said it was in the way she carried herself, the way she hadn't immediately recoiled from him. He explained that most people looked through him or at him with disgust. He told her she had a kind heart. The flattery was another tool, expertly wielded. It made her feel seen, mature, compassionate. And then the performance entered its second act, the confession. It began softly, a continuation of his philosophical musings. He said that a kind heart can sometimes be a dangerous thing to have. It can make you see good where there is none. He told her a story. He framed it as a burden he had carried for years, a ghost that haunted him. He spoke of a young woman he had known long ago. She was bright, he said, just like Amara, full of dreams. He had been her mentor of a sort. He had wanted to help her. Amara listened, her guard almost completely down now. This wasn't a threat, it was a confession. It was a plea for absolution from a broken man. She felt a pang of pity for him. Her natural empathy, the very trait he had just praised, was now turning against her. The story darkened. He spoke of a mistake, a single, terrible night. He described an argument, a misunderstanding. His voice was filled with a convincing sorrow. He painted himself as a victim of his own temper, a man who had lost control for just a moment. He said he hadn't meant to hurt her, but the details started to feel wrong. The way he described the young woman in his story, it wasn't with the remorse of someone who had accidentally harmed a friend. It was with a chilling sense of ownership. He described her fear not with regret, but with a strange, detached precision, as if he were a scientist observing a specimen. Amara's unease returned, sharp and cold. The pity she had felt began to curdle into disgust. The man's narrative was shifting. The sorrow in his voice was being replaced by something else, something harder. He wasn't confessing a tragedy. He was reliving a triumph. He described how she had tried to leave, how he had stopped her. He explained with that same calm, educated voice that he couldn't let her go. She had seen a part of him he didn't want anyone to see. The parallels to their current situation were suddenly, screamingly obvious. A young woman, a lonely place, a man who wouldn't let her leave. The bus stop was no longer a simple shelter. It was a stage. Amara was no longer a compassionate listener. She was the audience for a terrifying play, and she was beginning to realize she was also the main character. The story he was telling wasn't about the past. It was a dress rehearsal. He paused, his story finished. He looked over at her, his pale blue eyes searching her face. He wanted to see her reaction. He wanted to gauge the effect of his words. And in her expression, he found what he was looking for. He saw the dawning horror, the revulsion, the fear. And then he smirked. It was not a kind smile. It was not the sad, broken smile from before. It was a wide, triumphant smirk that did not reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, flat, and predatory. In that single horrifying moment, the entire facade crumbled. The homeless philosopher, the remorseful old man, it all evaporated, leaving behind something ancient and evil. He was not confessing to her, he was threatening her. He was showing her exactly who he was and what he was capable of. And he was enjoying her terror. The sound of the world rushed back into Amara's ears, the buzzing of the light, the rustle of the leaves, the frantic thumping of her own heart. The 17 minutes were almost up. She could hear, or maybe she just imagined, the distant rumble of the bus's engine. It was her lifeline, fight or flight. Her body screamed at her to run. Her mind, reeling from the psychological whiplash, struggled to form a plan. She couldn't show her fear. He was feeding on it. She had to act normal. She took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to quell the tremor in her hands. She closed her book with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. She stood up, her movements stiff. She slung her tote bag over her shoulder. She forced a small, tight smile. She said, her voice a reedy whisper she barely recognized as her own, that she thought she saw her friend's headlights. She told him it was nice talking to him. The lie was flimsy, pathetic, but it was all she had. She took one step away from the bench, then another. She did not run. She walked, forcing a casual pace, moving toward the road, away from him, toward the direction the bus would come from. Her back was to him. Every nerve ending screamed. She could feel his cold blue eyes on her. The man, Silas, did not speak. He simply watched her go. He let her take 3 steps. 4. He gave her a moment of hope. He let her believe for one fleeting second that she might actually get away. It was part of the game, the final cruel twist. Then he moved. The shuffling, frail old man was gone. He rose from the bench with a speed and agility that was utterly shocking. He covered the distance between them in 2 silent, predatory strides. Amara heard the scrape of his shoe on the asphalt behind her. She didn't have time to turn. She didn't have time to scream. A hand, surprisingly strong and rough as bark, clamped down on her upper arm. His grip was like a vice, his fingers digging into her flesh with brutal force. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. She twisted, trying to pull away, but his strength was immense, absolute. He was not the frail man he appeared to be. The layers of clothing disguised a wiry, powerful frame. He leaned in close, his face next to her ear. The sour smell of him was overpowering, suffocating. He whispered a single sentence, his voice no longer the gravelly baritone of the philosopher, but a harsh guttural rasp. He told her the show was not over yet. Then he yanked her hard. Amara stumbled, her feet scrambling for purchase on the uneven ground. He was not pulling her toward the road. He was pulling her toward the woods, toward the wall of impenetrable blackness. This was it, the story he had told her. It was happening. To her, the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Her survival instinct finally fully took over. She screamed, a raw, primal sound torn from the deepest part of her soul. It was a scream of pure terror, a sound that she hoped would carry for miles, that would shatter the windows of distant houses, that would bring the world running. He didn't try to silence her. He seemed to expect it, to welcome it. He simply tightened his grip and dragged her off the asphalt shoulder and onto the soft, damp earth at the edge of the forest. Her feet tangled in the undergrowth. She fell to her knees. She clawed at his hand, her nails scraping against his skin, but it was like trying to break iron. She swung her tote bag, but it was clumsy and ineffective. He was a machine, focused on a single task. He dragged her past the first line of trees, and the weak, flickering light of the bus stop was gone, swallowed by the canopy. They were plunged into near-total darkness. The world became a terrifying collage of sensations. The sharp sting of branches scratching her face and arms, the damp, rotting smell of leaf litter, the terrifying, inhuman strength of the hand that held her. She could hear his breathing, a low, steady panting, the sound of exertion and excitement. He was not struggling. He was in his element. This was his world, the dark, wild place beyond the reach of the light. Amara Jenkins, the girl with the big dreams and the fierce pride, was being dragged into the abyss by a monster wearing the mask of a man. Her final thought before the darkness consumed everything was of her mother, waiting at home, believing her daughter was safe on the bus. The narrative of Amara Jenkins ends there, in the terror and the darkness, but the story does not. The story is picked up by Detective Isabella Rossi, standing in the cold morning light, looking at a single white sneaker. Rossi was a veteran of the homicide division. She had a reputation for being meticulous, for seeing the details that others overlooked. Her colleagues called her the Ghost because she spent so much time communing with the last moments of the dead, piecing together their final hours from the silent evidence they left behind. The initial assessment from the uniforms on the scene was a likely runaway. An 18-year-old girl, an argument with her mum. It was a classic scenario. They figured she had dropped her bag, kicked off a shoe in frustration, and hitched a ride with a friend or a stranger, looking for a night of freedom. They saw an inconvenience, a missing persons report to file. Rossi saw something else. She saw the textbook, splayed open on the damp ground. A student as dedicated as Amara's mother described wouldn't be so careless with a $100 book. She saw the tote bag left neatly on the bench. A person running away takes their wallet. A person being taken leaves it behind. But it was the scuff marks that truly convinced her. Near the edge of the asphalt, just before the tree line, she found a series of deep gouges in the soft earth. They were the marks of shoes dragging, of a struggle. And leading from those marks into the woods was a faint but undeniable trail of broken twigs and trampled undergrowth. Someone had been pulled into that forest. Rossi's request for a full-scale forensic sweep and a K9 unit was met with weary sighs from her superiors, but her track record afforded her the leeway. While the team set up, Rossi drove to the Jenkins apartment. The interview with Denise Jenkins was heartbreaking. The woman was a wreck of guilt and fear, blaming herself for the argument, for letting Amara take that job, for not insisting on paying for a car. Rossi listened with a practiced empathy, gently guiding the conversation. She learned about Amara's pride, her routine, her refusal of a ride from her co-worker. Each detail was a small tragic brick in the wall of what had happened. Each no Amara had uttered out of a desire for independence had inadvertently pushed her closer to the monster waiting at the end of the line. The K9 unit found the first piece of concrete evidence within an hour. Deep inside the woods, nearly 100 yards from the road, a search dog began to bark excitedly near a thicket of ferns. Tucked beneath them was Amara's cell phone. Its screen was cracked and the battery was dead. It was a dead end for tracking, but its location confirmed Rossi's theory. Amara had not walked into these woods. She had been taken. The search of the woods continued for 2 days and yielded nothing more. No body, no weapon, no further signs of a struggle. It was as if Amara and her abductor had been swallowed by the earth. The case was officially a kidnapping, and Amara's face was soon on every news channel. Detective Rossi, however, was haunted by the setting. The bus stop. The perpetrator had to know the route, the schedule, the isolation. This was not a crime of opportunity. It was planned. She pulled surveillance footage from every camera she could find within a 5-mile radius. Most of it was useless, but a single grainy camera mounted on the side of a warehouse a quarter of a mile from the stop provided the first glimpse of the ghost. At 11:41 p.m, an indistinct figure is seen walking along the shoulder of Old Creek Road, heading in the direction of the bus stop. The figure is stooped, shuffling. It appears to be the same person seen an hour later, leaving the area, though the footage is too poor to make a positive identification. But it was a start. It placed someone there, waiting. Weeks turned into a month. The case went cold. The news cycle moved on. But Rossi did not. She kept Amara's picture on her desk. She reread the case file every night, searching for the one detail she had missed. She was convinced the key was the perpetrator's behavior. The waiting, the specific location. It felt like a signature. The break came from an unexpected place. A bulletin from a police department 3 states away landed on her desk. It was a request for information on any similar cold cases. A young college student had narrowly escaped an abduction attempt at a remote rest stop. The details were chillingly familiar. The survivor, a 20-year-old nursing student, had been waiting for her friend to pick her up. A disheveled older man had approached her. He had started a conversation, pretending to be a lost soul. He had then launched into a detailed, horrifying story about a past crime, a story he told while watching her for her reaction. When she became frightened and tried to leave, he had attacked her. She was saved only by the chance arrival of her friend's car, its headlights scaring the man off into the woods. Rossi felt a jolt of adrenaline. The story. It was the missing piece of the psychological puzzle. The perpetrator wasn't just abducting his victims. He was terrorizing them first. He was putting on a show. She immediately contacted the detective on the case, a man named Sergeant Miller. Miller had a name. The survivor had worked with a sketch artist, and the resulting image, combined with a partial print lifted from her car door, had pinged a name from an old, archived database. The name was not Silas, it was Dr. Martin Keller. The revelation was stunning. Dr. Martin Keller had been a tenured professor of clinical psychology at a prestigious university. He had been a leading expert in narcissistic personality disorders and psychopathy. He had literally written the book on manipulation. Then 12 years ago, he had vanished. His disappearance had coincided with an investigation into the unsolved disappearance of one of his graduate students, a young woman who had been working closely with him on his research. The police had suspected his involvement, but they never had enough evidence to charge him. Keller had simply walked away from his life, his career, his family, his home, and disappeared. Rossi now understood. Keller hadn't just disappeared, he had transformed. He had used his own academic knowledge to create the perfect predatory disguise. The persona of the homeless, broken intellectual was a masterstroke of psychological manipulation. It was designed to disarm, to prey on empathy, to turn a victim's kindness into the very tool of their entrapment. The story he told was not just a threat, it was a ritual. It was a twisted psychological experiment where he could watch his theories play out in real time. He studied his victims' reactions to fear, disgust, and horror. The abduction itself was almost secondary to the pleasure he derived from this sick, intimate performance. A nationwide manhunt was launched for Martin Keller. Rossi and her team, armed with this new information, re-examined their evidence. They now knew they were looking for a man who was an expert at being invisible, a man who could blend into the background of society. He would be in a shelter, a library, or another desolate bus stop, looking for his next audience. 3 weeks later, he was found. A librarian in a small town in Oregon recognized the face from the FBI bulletin. A man matching Keller's description had been coming into the library every day for a week, sitting in the philosophy section, quietly observing the college students studying nearby. The arrest was quiet. Keller offered no resistance. When they took him into custody, the smirk he gave the arresting officers was the same one Amara Jenkins had seen in her final moments. It was the smirk of a performer who had been caught, but who was still proud of his show. During interrogation, Keller was silent. He offered no confession, no remorse. He simply sat, observing the detectives with the cool, detached air of a researcher studying lab rats. But the evidence was overwhelming. DNA found under Amara's fingernails, which had been carefully preserved, was a perfect match for Martin Keller. Fibers from his coat were found on her clothing. He never told them where Amara was. Her body was never found. But for the abduction and murder of Amara Jenkins, and for the attempted abduction of the student 3 states away, Martin Keller was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his existence in a box, the final subject of his own twisted study. The case of Amara Jenkins sent a shockwave through law enforcement communities. It served as a brutal lesson in the nature of modern predation. The monster is not always the obvious threat, the overtly aggressive stranger. Sometimes, the monster wears a mask of weakness. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon is a story, and the most vulnerable target is a kind heart. Amara's dream of becoming a graphic designer was extinguished on that cold October night, but her story became a legacy. It became a cautionary tale told to young people everywhere, a reminder that vigilance is not the same as cynicism. It is a necessary shield in a world where predators are not just hunting for victims, but for an audience. Her life, though tragically short, served a final powerful purpose: to shine a light on a darkness that thrives on being underestimated, and to arm others with the one thing Martin Keller could never take from them: awareness. Her memory is not just one of tragedy, but of a warning that continues to save lives.